San Francisco has spent years operating like a team with one goal: win the Super Bowl. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan built a roster filled with elite players, survived expensive contracts and major injuries, and repeatedly remained in contention. But the financial equation has changed. The cheap quarterback advantage is gone, and keeping this championship window open now requires an entirely different level of roster management. That's because the 49ers are entering a new financial era. For years, Brock Purdy's tiny rookie contract allowed San Francisco to spend aggressively everywhere else. Now the quarterback is one of the major investments himself. That means every expensive veteran, every extension, and especially every draft pick matters more. San Francisco still has star power, but there's much less room for expensive mistakes. Everything starts with Brock Purdy. The final pick of the 2022 draft went from Mr. Irrelevant to Super Bowl quarterback and eventually earned a 5-year extension in 2025. San Francisco decided Purdy wasn't simply a product of Kyle Shanahan's system. He was their franchise quarterback. The question now is whether they can keep enough talent around him once quarterback money becomes part of the equation. Contract grade, B+. On defense, Nick Bosa remains one of the players San Francisco built everything around. Elite edge rushers are incredibly expensive because they can wreck an offense without needing a blitz. That's exactly what Bosa provides. Paying premium money to a defensive end creates cap pressure, but if you're going to spend heavily on defense, a game-changing pass rusher is one of the smartest places to do it. Contract grade, A-. Fred Warner is the heartbeat of the defense. And San Francisco reinforced that commitment with another extension in 2025, keeping him under contract through 2029. Warner isn't simply an elite linebacker. He's the communicator, leader, and centerpiece of the entire unit. The 49ers chose continuity with one of their best homegrown players, even knowing that maintaining an expensive defensive core would become increasingly difficult. Contract grade, A. George Kittle is another homegrown star San Francisco refused to let walk. The former 5th-round pick received a 4-year extension in 2025 that keeps him under contract through 2029. Kittle gives Shanahan much more than receiving production. He blocks, creates mismatches, brings physicality, and helps define the offense's personality. He's getting older, but elite tight ends with his versatility are extremely difficult to replace. Contract grade, A-. Then there's Christian McCaffrey. Running backs usually aren't where teams want to make huge financial commitments, but McCaffrey isn't a normal running back. When healthy, he can function as a runner, receiver, matchup weapon, and centerpiece of Shanahan's offense. The talent isn't the question. At this stage of his career, availability and longevity are what determine whether the investment continues paying off. Contract grade, B+. And somehow, Trent Williams is still protecting the blind side. At 38 years old, San Francisco doubled down instead of preparing for an immediate goodbye, reaching another 2-year extension with Williams in 2026. That's a win-now decision. Williams remains one of the most important players on the offense, but the 49ers also know the end is approaching. Williams himself has suggested 2027 will probably be his final season. Contract grade, B+. Ricky Pearsall represents the other side of this roster-building equation. Once you're paying Purdy, Bosa, Warner, Kittle and other established stars, young players on rookie contracts become incredibly valuable. Pearsall doesn't have to carry the entire offense by himself. He needs to become productive while he's inexpensive. That's how San Francisco can offset the massive contracts already sitting at the top of the roster. That same philosophy applies defensively. San Francisco has historically invested heavily in difference makers, especially along the defensive front. But the names surrounding Bosa have changed significantly. The 2026 roster features a newer defensive group around him, including players such as Osa Odighizuwa and young talent San Francisco hopes can develop into the next wave. The defense is being reloaded, not simply preserved. Offensively, the challenge is similar. Purdy, McCaffrey, Kittle and Williams give San Francisco an expensive veteran foundation, but the supporting cast has to evolve. The 49ers can no longer rely on the exact collection of weapons from the previous Super Bowl run. That's why younger receivers and inexpensive depth are becoming so important. The stars can be expensive. The supporting cast can't all be. This is where salary cap management becomes more complicated than simply looking at available space. Contracts can be restructured. Money can be pushed into future seasons. Veterans can be released, traded, or extended to change the yearly cap charges. San Francisco has used those tools aggressively before, but restructuring doesn't erase money. It moves the bill, and eventually, somebody has to pay it. That's why drafting becomes the lifeline of this roster. San Francisco famously found Purdy with the final pick of the draft and Kittle in the 5th round. Those kinds of hits create enormous surplus value. Now the 49ers need the next generation to emerge around their expensive stars. Cheap contributors aren't just helpful anymore. They're necessary for keeping this championship window alive. And that's the philosophy John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have built together. San Francisco identifies cornerstone players, pays the ones it believes are irreplaceable, and constantly tries to replenish the roster underneath them. It hasn't been perfect. No front office is. But the 49ers have repeatedly built teams capable of competing deep into January. That sustained contention is the strongest argument for their approach. So when we evaluate San Francisco's cap management, there's a lot to like. Purdy provides long-term stability at quarterback. Bosa and Warner anchor the defense. Kittle and McCaffrey remain major offensive weapons, and Williams is still protecting the edge. But there's also a clear risk. The roster is expensive, several cornerstone players are aging, and the margin for error is getting smaller. The biggest future challenge is simple: San Francisco can't keep solving every cap problem by pushing money forward. Eventually, younger players need to replace expensive veterans. Draft picks need to become starters. And the front office has to know when paying for past production becomes more dangerous than moving on a year too early. That's the difference between extending a championship window and watching one suddenly close. Trent Williams is 38. Christian McCaffrey is 30. George Kittle is 32. These players can still make a massive difference, but San Francisco has reached the stage where age matters almost as much as talent. The 49ers must constantly ask the uncomfortable question: are we paying for what this player will do next, or what he already did? And that brings us to the tightrope San Francisco is walking. The goal isn't to tear everything down. The goal is to transition without falling out of contention. Keep the true difference makers. Develop inexpensive replacements. Avoid emotional contracts. And give Brock Purdy enough support to compete for another championship. Winning now is difficult. Staying good after everyone gets paid is even harder. So what grade does San Francisco's front office deserve? I'm giving the 49ers a B+. They've built multiple championship-caliber rosters, retained elite homegrown talent, and found value throughout the draft. But the easy financial years are over. The next phase will determine whether San Francisco's window stays open, or whether the bill finally catches up. Subscribe to Front Office Explained for more NFL salary cap breakdowns.